Greetings, one and all, and welcome back to the 1904 Club, the Hull City podcast from the Hull Daily Mail. And it's August the 1st, which can only mean one thing, and that is the return of the EFL League 1 and 2 this weekend. And obviously, the Championship is back next weekend. And so we're going to chat all things Hull City with Fletch and Kathryn, but it would be remiss, I think, to not start with the Lionesses. And given that Kathryn has had a month-long holiday out in the Swiss mountains, I'm not jealous at all. I feel like we should start with Kathryn and just a bit of a recap, really, on what has been a phenomenal summer for the Lionesses, capped, I guess, with the final win on Sunday and those incredible scenes in front of Bookhouse on Tuesday, Kathryn.
Yeah, you wouldn't be as jealous if you saw my bank balance, Baz. Let me tell you that it's made me think London is cheap. But essentially what happened was Prutz came out for the first game against France, as did Thomas Tuchel, and England lost. And then once they left, they went on to win the tournament. So essentially that is the moral of the story, is that don't let Prutz or Thomas Tuchel come to a game and everything will be fine. It only did feel like multiple times they were going out. Against Sweden, I think I felt it more against Italy because it went right down to the 96th minute when they equalised. Something you'll appreciate, having to kind of file a match report. I'd written a whole report on England going out, but there was sort of, with about 4 minutes to go, there's sort of something in my brain that made me think I better start just writing an alternative intro for them to equalise and then go into extra time, because obviously extra time you've got to write that, for the paper you've got to write they went to extra time basically without a result. So I started writing that and left in the gaps. So I was a little bit ahead by the time the goal went in, but it was still kind of like a mad rush to finish. And we sort of had this joke throughout the whole tournament that like in the first game, Adjuman came on. Obviously they were 2-0 down, it went to 2-1. And they nearly got an equaliser, and we were kind of saying that would have been terrible for our match reports, as much as we would have wanted to. But we sort of said, especially Adjuman, because it would be such a good story if she was the one that equalised, because of being a 19-year-old and sort of coming from nowhere. And I think she must have heard us say that after the game, because then she proceeded to be the player that scored the equaliser twice. But yeah, I mean, it was great. I don't know if you've ever found, if you've covered games against Spanish teams, but the Spanish press do like to celebrate in the press box, which is a bit of a faux pas.
They do.
So they were very much, they were on their feet when they took the lead. And then in the penalty shootout, when England missed the first one and Spain scored, they were high-fiving. But by the time Chloe Kelly scored, they were very much more quiet and despondent.
You should have seen us in the press box at Fratton Park. I mean, the Spanish lads had nothing on us.
I think that's more allowable, though, isn't it? I mean, it's a high five, and I think that got me. There's sort of this cheering that's kind of obviously you want your country to win. I think fair enough, but even there's kind of an etiquette that you don't sort of cheer really, although some people do. But it was the high five and across desks. I was sort of what is going on here?
What was the French media like?
As well, terrible.
What were the French media like? Because I know it's right back at the start, but I remember going to Toulouse to do a rugby game with Radio York, and every time there was a knock-on or a decision that went their way, I basically had this ex-player alongside me who was just punching the desk, and every 2 minutes, people back in North Yorkshire could probably just hear this thud as we call them ISDN boxes, my commentary box was just lifting off the desk and then landing back on the table. Because they're so, as you said, they're so passionate. And what were they like?
They were not as bad as the Spanish, but there was a bit of cheering when they scored. But it was weird because France was so adamant they were going to get beat in that game. All the French journalists were like, we are going to lose. And we were like, all right, okay. We don't know what. We've kind of thought it would be, a bit closer. And then they obviously won. And then the Dutch journalists started doing it as well. They were like, we're definitely losing. Actually, I can't do an impression of a Dutch person.
I was just going to say, actually, your French, given you spent a month in Switzerland, your French has really come on based on what you've just done there.
Yeah, they did speak in English to us. So, but yeah, I think the Dutch started saying, we're definitely going to lose. And we were sort of like, this is, we can't have this every game. And then obviously we did sort of thrash the Dutch quite heavily in the end. But yeah, it was quite weird. The semi-final was in Geneva. And obviously we were in Zurich for most of it, which is close to the sort of German side. Pretty much speak sort of a form of German there. And we went going over to Geneva, Europe, obviously closer to France.
On the French side,
what I didn't realise is my hotel that work booked for me was actually in France. When we got it up on the map, we were like, oh, that's over the border in another country. Yeah. Not ideal. But it was only about 4 stops on the train, so not horrendous.
And it probably saved the Telegraph about £15,000 as well, just by simply being over the border.
I think a few fans did that. I realised when there was about several England fans in my hotel on the day of the game, I was like, I can see the thought process here.
Absolutely. You talk about the press box. I've got to be honest, there were stages last season where I got really, probably over-emotional. And I think back to Charlie Hughes at Hillsborough, and I should probably apologise to Alex, who's my colleague at the Star in Sheffield, because I think I nearly landed on him when Charlie Hughes put that header in the back of the net. So, but yeah, it is.
We've all been there, Baz. We've all been there.
We're all passionate, and there is press box etiquette. But I think in the second half of last season, when it got like every goal mattered at City, there were various punches of the desk, and that wasn't just because of the Wi-Fi.
I have to say as well, like Jess Park went to my school, so that was the whole connection. So if she didn't play particularly much, but she did play 45 minutes against Wales. She nearly scored. Obviously, I think she grew up around kind of the Brough area, and I think her dad went out to watch the final and some other family members. So it was kind of nice to see like a whole connection there, getting the medal as well.
Absolutely. Were you in central London on Tuesday for the parade?
Yes, I was. I was there in body. I think in mind, I was sort of, somewhere
a bit
else.
like Leah Williamson.
Yeah.
And what was that like as an experience?
It was crazy. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. I think sort of back to when Hull got promoted all those kind of years ago under Peter Taylor, and we never kind of went to the parade, so kind of not kind of been to anything like that before, and the amount of people that turned up, it was just crazy. Yeah, it was brilliant to see, and I think just kind of like in 2022 they'd only had about 7,000 because it was all kind of arranged quite in a panic, and the venue was sort of capped, whereas obviously they sort of had planned it out properly this time. Obviously had the 2 buses, and they said that it was sort of over 65,000, but it looked like kind of way sort of more than that, taking everyone that sort of was further down the mall and everything.
I also think it's always difficult to quantify. When you hear like, oh, there was 250,000 people here and 100,000. It's like, how do you actually quantify that? Because it's not a ticketed event, so you've got no way of knowing. But like you say, that it did seem when they said 65,000 that seemed like on the lower side of what actually happened. And it's fantastic, isn't it? It's just what a phenomenal journey they've been on. And we were talking before the tournament how they didn't look great they've not looked great generally since winning the tournament at Wembley. And then obviously they've gone and done it again. It's incredible achievement, isn't it?
Yeah, they're very much like a tournament team, I think. Sometimes they just find it, like they find that kind of extra level. I mean, as I say, they nearly went home a couple of times. It's so funny to think back to that game they lost against France. If we were sort of saying like they need to win the next game or they're going out, and the narrative would have been so different. There'd have been people kind of calling for Serena's head probably, and kind of they would have got a real sort of kick in, but they managed to turn it around and kind of somehow keep getting through and keep coming back. And by the time they got to the final, I just felt like there was some, they'd got through so many hurdles. It felt like they were even though Spain were the favourites, they were going to sort of find a way to win it. And when it went to penalties, I just thought they're winning it on penalties, because Hampton was just sort of a different level.
What blew my mind on that was one of my best mates who I went to university with, his sister, who I know as well. She was Hannah Hampton. She was on this morning, actually, the other day, because she was Hannah Hampton's PE teacher at school. And Hannah Hampton's 24. And it doesn't seem 5 minutes since I was, really. We were going around. I was going around for tea at my mate's house, and Emma was there, and she's a bit younger than 4 or 5 years younger than we are. And she was Hampton's PE teacher. It was just like, it blows your mind, doesn't it? How time moves on and like, where we are. But she was just amazing in that tournament, given and what she'd said before the tournament as well, that she, perhaps people don't want her in the team because of Mary Earps and everything like that. And she's gone on It's not all been plain sailing for her, but in that final, she was phenomenal.
Yeah, no, she was. And it's like it's been well documented that she's got like this kind of depth perception issue with an eye condition, which she shouldn't really be like. It doesn't make sense, but she's one of the best goalkeepers out there. I actually thought she should probably have been in with a shout of player of the tournament. It sort of felt like they gave it to Bon Matty just because. I'm not sure how many games the decision makers at UEFA were watching, but it was sort of like, oh, Bon Matty's good, just give it to her. Because they usually give it to a player from the winning team. But I don't even think Bon Matty was good in the knockouts, but I don't think she was Spain's best player throughout the whole tournament. But there we go. Goalkeepers never get the awards, do they?
They certainly don't. So on to matters, fantastic achievement from the Lionesses, but on to matters of Hull City. I guess you'd have been keeping an eye on what was going on while you're out in Switzerland. Any thoughts on pre-season so far?
Yeah, I think it was about day 3 when that transfer ban came in. Now it's in Switzerland, and I thought, great, what a good start to the trip. To be honest, I think that week felt like a really bad week when that news kind of came out. It does feel like it feels a little bit better now in terms of obviously they've cleared some of the money that they owe. I know they're obviously still waiting for this appeal, so it's not kind of a fantastic position to be in, but I am feeling a little bit more optimistic in a sense that some of the signings they've made look like some decent loan and free transfers. I think the Lundstram, am I pronouncing him right?
John Lundstram, yeah.
I think he's a good signing. I think he's experienced. He sort of feels like a type of midfield player we've needed for a long time. If he can kind of get up to speed quickly. And I know obviously they're still kind of looking at McBurney and a few other players that have come in that you kind of look at and think they're kind of solid signings given the circumstances. Losing Alfie Jones and Sean McLaughlin, it feels like we're a little bit light in some areas. I think we still need another striker as well. But in terms of kind of where we were at the start of the summer to now, it feels a little bit. It does feel a little bit more. It feels a little bit better, but we're still obviously we still need some more bodies through the building.
Yeah, absolutely. Fletch, I'll come to you in just a second. So just to run through where we're at in terms of signings then. Rida Lelouis was the first one arriving, the young Moroccan midfielder. Unfortunately, because of the situation with the EFL, as Kathryn rightly mentions, they've not been able to get that approved by the Football League yet. I think it's about £400,000. But he's still around. He's not trained. We were out in Turkey for the week. He didn't train at all. He'd got a slight injury. But he's still around, and they're hoping that they can find some wriggle room with the Football League on that one. We'll have to wait and see. Dylan Phillips, the goalkeeper, free transfer. Shemi Ajayi, free transfer. Akin Femiwo announced. We had a kind of bizarre period on Tuesday night, actually, before the game, where they were waiting to announce Femiwo and Joel and Andela. Andela was on the team sheet, but the deal hadn't actually gone through yet. So in the end, they managed to get it. Both deals got approved. Femiwo obviously wasn't involved. Andela was on the bench. You'd got Brandon Williams from the former Manchester United player, was also on the team sheet. He was on the bench as a trialist. And then I think we had a 4:30 announcement for Akin Femiwo, and then we had a 6:30 or 6:35 to be precise announcement for Andela. So those are in. They've obviously we're recording on Friday morning, so Thursday night they announced John Lundstram on loan from Trabzonspor, and probably when this goes out, they will have announced Enis Destan, the forward, the 23-year-old Turkish forward from Trabzonspor, and they're also hoping to get a deal for Nigerian winger David Akintola over the line, but that's, as I understand it, is subject to a visa application, which hasn't, at the time of recording, hasn't been approved. And then there's Ollie McBurney. I know there's a lot of talk on social media that he's coming, it's done and dusted, that he's on his way. I mean, it won't take him that long to get to Hull, given where he lives. So I'm not sure he's still on his way. But as I understand it, that deal is not done yet, and McBurney has not decided. And potentially there's a feeling within the club that he might go elsewhere. So talk of it being done and dusted and it all over. I know McBurney's liking social media posts for Lundstram coming to the club and stuff. as it stands now, I don't believe that deal has been done. He's been offered a very lucrative contract, a long-term contract at Hull City, but he does have interest from Ipswich. Obviously, Sheffield United is sniffing around. I think that the Swansea thing, I was speaking to somebody at Swansea yesterday, and their feeling is that it's unlikely that he'll go back to Swansea. I think Swansea are trying to sign the lad from, the striker from Wickham, which would almost certainly end their interest in McBurney. And the kind of I know there's this suggestion that he has been offered a contract by Swansea, but certainly not at the level that Hull City are prepared to have and are prepared to pay him. So lots of stuff kicking off. I think Lundstram's a great signing. Fletch, where are you? Where are you at with players? The players they brought in, the likes of obviously Burstow, as Kathryn mentioned, Jones, McLaughlin going, Simon's going, Malem going earlier in the summer. We're just waiting for confirmation of Steve Nalzati's move to Atlanta to be confirmed. Where are you at with, given the issues they've got, the restrictions they're working under, and the fact they can't buy players at the minute, and they can't pay loan fees? Kind of, how are you feeling about things?
Where do we start? There's so much going on, isn't there, with incomings and outgoings.
So like Hull City.
Yeah. I think if we look at McBurney first and we look at the clubs that you've just referenced there, I think Hull City, Swansea and Ipswich all have their own unique selling points to Ollie McBurney, and it will be down to his choice. So if he's been offered a lucrative deal, so first of all, the finance of a lucrative deal in a club where he is going to be the number one choice is one example. It would likely be that he would be relatively in that same domain at Swansea, but as you say, they are looking at other options. There is that emotional feel, given he's already been there and done well there. If Ipswich are interested in him, I would be very surprised if he was the number one striker, given they've got Hurst, Chaplin and Al Hamadi all vying for the same position. Now, whether or not that is one of those situations where McKenna, the manager, wants four players to really duel against each other and training to get the best out of them, I don't see how he becomes the number one choice at Ipswich Town, even though he's a very good championship striker. A club that we haven't mentioned, which I really wouldn't be at all surprised to see come in for him, would be Wrexham, given that this morning, at the time of recording, they've agreed a £2 million fee for Kiefer Moore, and also getting Connor Cody as a defender. So they seem to have some spending power going into the championship as well.
On Wrexham, they're spending a great...
And this is the thing that makes it very complicated, Baz, because what I'm trying to get my head around is how severe is the situation financially if they're not allowed to stump up £400,000 for a player that they've already announced as a signing, but isn't signed yet because they need to pay X amount of pounds, as you've just referenced. That's the thing I can't really get my head around. The
other thing, just on McBurney, I think there's Las Palmas still think there's a fair chance they get him back as well. So you can't rule out, I guess, a potential return to Spain. I know they got relegated. That's why he left, because of the clause in his deal. But yeah, look, I think the thing is, if he comes to City, with respect to Carl Joseph, who I thought who's had a decent pre-season, I thought he was very good on in the work he did on Tuesday night, and obviously he's injury free now. I did an interview with him out in Turkey where he said he'd had an ankle injury pretty much for the last year or so, and it hampered him last season massively. He's had that operated on, and he's back fully fit. But I think McBurney would come in. I think he would thrive in Sergei's system, particularly with the emphasis on wingers, and he would be. I think he would be the first choice centre forward for the most part. The fans would take to him massively. He's obviously close to home, and he'd get probably the biggest contract that he would get of all the clubs that are of Swansea, Sheffield United and Ipswich. I think City's deal is probably more lucrative for him, and in terms of time as well. We're talking 3 to 4 years potentially. So,
but here's the thing, Baz. Sorry to interrupt. When we say the most lucrative, the thing that I can't really calculate in my head is if they're slapping down a big wage on one player. Let's just say, for example, I'm not saying this is the true figure, but if it was £20,000 a week, just as an example, 80 before tax and everything else, 80 grand a month, times that by 12, you're touching nearly £1 million. So how can it be justified if they've given him a 3-year contract that's £1 million a year, so it totals £3 million, but then you can't be allowed to put £400,000 on the table to bring a player in as a fee.
Well, I guess that's the nonsense of the embargo, isn't it? That you're not allowed to buy.
That's the thing that I just can't work out in my head, and I think that's why there's a little bit of confusion amongst the fan base as well, to be honest. Because if I was in their shoes, that's what I'd be justifying. How were we allowed to put this amount of? Because in theory, they could go and get one of the elite players in Turkey or the Premier League and say, well, we'll give them 50 grand a week, but they're coming in on a free.
I don't think this is the nuance.
I'm not saying they would. But
no, clearly, but
it's the same situation, isn't it?
This is the nuance of this bizarre situation they've got at the minute, where they're not allowed to buy players, but they can. But the EFL will put a stop to, if they wanted to pay McBurney £40,000 a week, the EFL would say no. And I think early conversations after the embargo is because this McBurney thing has been. It's getting to be fair, it's getting a bit boring because it's been dragging on for months now. It's 5 weeks ago, at least 5 weeks ago, that the manager first had a sit down with him, and I know the club were in discussions with him before that. So, I think their early conversations with the EFL were like, what you're wanting to pay for McBurney, we don't think you can afford based on what's going on. Now, clearly, there was a conversation with the EFL on Tuesday that to try and find some common ground to get some deals over the line, hence why we had Femiwo announced, hence why we had Joel and Andela. Now we've had Lundstram. We're going to get, all being well, Destan as well, and potentially Akintola. That is, not down to the EFL. That's down to the UK government and the visa process at the minute. So, but it's a valid question that you can pay. And let's be fair, McBurney won't be being. I think you're very conservative in your estimate of £20,000 a week, but I get your point. I get your point. But yeah, it's a valid question. If you're going to pay this player, £25,000-30,000 a week, but yet you can't sign a young player on for £400,000 that won't be paid anywhere near that. So yeah, look. I guess the football club are in kind of a holding pattern at the minute where they're waiting to find out what happens next week. Do they get? I mean, it won't be. All the information that we've had is that it will not be a 3-window fee restriction. That it will be reduced. It's just how that looks. As we've said before, it's how that looks. Is it a 1 window? Are they just basically banned from buying players for this summer, and from January they're okay? Is it going to be suspended for? Will it be reduced and then suspended, a la what happened to Oxford United a year or so ago? Will it be scrapped altogether? Will there be some kind of management plan put in place? Because the EFL have got concerns about the finances. You speak to Ajun Ilagela, his kind of attitude is very different. He believes that the club are okay. We all know, and it's been well documented, that the club have had financial issues in terms of, paying suppliers, paying other football clubs. And what we can't get away from is this football club, what goes on in Turkey, and what may be acceptable in Turkey, and how you run things in the Super League is a world away from what it's like in England and what you're allowed to do in England and within the EFL. So, but we'll have to wait and see what happens with the appeal that's going to be heard next week, and then they'll find out within a period of time, hopefully before the first game, and have some idea of what remit they're working with, and whether that McBurney deal is dependent on the outcome of that appeal, and whether they're trying to hold off that until they know what their abilities are financially. Kathryn, what's your kind of assessment of this whole situation and the restrictions that the EFL have placed on them, and how they're trying to manoeuvre within that?
Well, I don't want to be accused of being too negative again, as I was from the last podcast. That was actually before the transfer ban was imposed. But this is the thing. Like, we all want them to succeed. None of us are sat here kind of, really wanting to find things to complain or moan about. But because it's not in our interest. I'm a fan as much as anybody that kind of listens, and I don't want them to be in this position. I don't want the club to be, don't want to be talking about things going on in the club that are maybe not great. I do think, like I kind of said earlier, it did feel it's obviously not a good situation regardless, but at least they've kind of been able to bring some players in. It does feel like we're still light in a number of positions. You're obviously going to lose Alzate. I think they might need another player in that midfield bracket that's sort of more of a ball playing midfielder. I still think they're light up front. Obviously, a lot of it's going to be depending on McBurney, but they were the lowest goal scorers in the league last season. That isn't suddenly just going to change by not bringing in different players. I know that you've got Miller and Baluma to come back from injury, and they will be a big boost when they do come back, and they might feel like new signings when they return. But they still need another centre forward. And you think you've lost João Pedro, and he didn't contribute like a massive amount of goals, but he was still the top goal scorer. You've lost Gelhardt, who got a few at the end of the season, and it's very difficult to know because there's quite a lot of players in that squad, Joseph being one of them. It's hard to predict how he's going to do because I think it's hard to judge him on what we saw last season. Obviously, you mentioned his injury, but he came in at such a sort of difficult time where we were trying to fight relegation, and he just had to try and come in and do a job. And if he gets a goal in the first game of the season, you never know, he could kind of go on a run. But if he doesn't and he kind of goes on a run without scoring again, it might be a bit more difficult for him. I'm sure you're probably going to talk about Ryan Giles at some point, but there's players like himself that have come back, and you're like, well, there's definitely a player in there. We know that he can perform, but we've not seen it in a Hull City shirt for quite a long time. So you're kind of relying on, well, can they get the best out of him? And then actually, does that solve a problem at left back that they don't need, reinforcement there? And Cody Dram was linked with a move earlier in the summer, and he's still here. And well, he can perform at times as well. He can also have bad games, and it's like, well, if you can get the best out of him, and he stays, does that kind of solve a problem? It's sort of, there's so many players in that squad where you think they can be better than they were last season, and can this new manager get the best out of them? And then suddenly, we might feel a little bit better about things with the new players that have come in. But it's quite difficult to judge how much they need when there's so many players that kind of, I guess, underperformed last season, but we know can probably be better than what they showed. As I said, yeah, I still think they're light in areas. It's the attack that I think is the biggest concern for me, because even though we've lost two centre-backs who were part of, the back four that became a lot more solid in the second half of the season, I still think you've still got Charlie Hughes. We've still got a Jay who's experienced and should hopefully fill a gap there. We probably could still do with another centre back, I think. But I guess it's probably where the priority is. But I do think, to be fair, Jared Dublin's pretty good in terms of his knowledge of the EFL and the players that are probably available to him. So I think what he's managed to do so far is like not too bad. But naturally, you kind of want him to have a bit more free rein and not having to just go for loans and free transfers.
Fletch, just before I come to you, I think it's an interesting point you raised about the defence, Kathryn, because I think on paper, when you look at the four they've got now, they've got Egan, Hughes, Ajay, and Femiwo. On paper, exceptional quality. Ajay, Nigerian international, fantastic for West Brom. Charlie Hughes, I think Charlie Hughes has had a fantastic pre-season. My only concern defensively is durability. You look at McLaughlin and Jones, and I have no issue at all with those players going. Jones, you're getting, from my understanding, in excess of £3 million for Alfie Jones, and you got, I think, just over 500,000 for Sean. Both players Sean wanted to go and play. He wasn't going to be a regular at centre back. He's never been a regular at centre back in the 6 years at Hull City. The only time he's been a regular was at left back in the second half of last season. So understandably, he wanted to go and play. Alfie, again, probably wasn't going to be first choice. And there was good money on the table, as I say, over £3 million by the time it's all paid up. But when you look at Femiwo, fantastic start to the season at Sheffield Wednesday last year, got injured and missed 26 games. Ajay started, he's been brilliant, but he had a couple of big injuries last season, didn't play a lot of games. Charlie Hughes, I think, didn't, he had two lengthy spells out injured last season, and John Egan hadn't played at all before coming to City. So it's where, on the flip side, you look at McLaughlin and Jones, pretty much always available. So on paper, yes, I think defensively they're in a really good position, and we'll touch on the wing backs if we get chance. But it's whether those players, Egan, Hughes, Ajay, and Femiwo, are going to be able to play 40 games a season. Now, obviously, there's 4 of them, so they can't all play. I'm aware of that. But as long as there's enough of them can play enough games, they'll be okay. And that is my only kind of niggling doubt in the back of my head, is about their availability and about whether they're fit enough to be playing Saturday, Tuesday for 9 months of the season. Fletch, one of the things that's been obvious probably all of last season, and particularly this summer, is in midfield. And ever since letting Mika Seri go last summer, because he didn't want to be part of it, he wanted out, they've not had that number 6 that dictates play, that picks up the ball off the back 4, that shields, but picks up the ball off the back 4 or the goalkeeper, and can shift it to players going forward. That was the first off at Stockport. It was played 75-year-old Ollie Norwood bossed it. They changed it in the second half. They dropped Crooks a bit deeper, and against Sunderland they did similar. Can Lundstram be that player? I know he can play as a 6 or an 8, but can Lundstram be that player that can dominate from the base of midfield and give them that real control in the engine room? Something they never really had, even with Alzate last season. They didn't really boss a midfield.
I don't see why not, because he's such an experienced midfielder at this level. And for some players, who when you hit the 30-year mark, some midfielders will adapt and maybe change their style of players as a midfielder because of various factors. So the short answer is I certainly don't see why not, because he has got a range of passing. He likes to play a long ball as well if they want to switch it on the diagonal, and he can have a go from distance as well if he ends up sort of meandering forward into the final third. So I certainly don't see why that wouldn't be a problem. Also, something that I think one of the non-physical attributes of Lundstram, which I think is something that he's always had, is he's a very good reader of the game, very good concentration as well. When to go in for a tackle, when to play a pass, where do I need to be in terms of a position? So I certainly don't see why not in that regard. It's just a question of how Sergei Yakurovich wants to utilise him when he comes in, because I do think the midfield last year, as someone who was by far and away nowhere near as involved with Hull City as I was last year, I will admit at times I lost touch with what I thought was the best 3 to play in midfield in the centre and what their responsibilities were. You two might be able to cast some better light on that than I do, but I think what I'm getting at is I think someone like Lundstram brings in a clear identity. You could argue that to the opposition that might make them more predictable, but on the other hand, it gives a clear identity of what Sergei Yakurovich and the team can do going forward.
Kathryn, in terms of like somebody like Lundstram, I know people are joking about getting the old Sheffield United band back together if McBurney does come, but in terms of like you've got, and obviously Jared Dublin knows 1 or 2 of them from his time at Sheffield United. The likes of Egan, Crooks, Lundstram, even Femiwo, Shemi Ajay, there feels like a real solid base of championship experience now. Yes, they're Femiwo excluded, they're over 30. Those players, but is that giving them a real kind of solid grounding for championship experience and know-how and nous that you need, perhaps again that they didn't really have last season?
Yeah, and I think if you're short on players that are going to sort of score you maybe 15 goals a season, if you've not got one of them in your squad, or you've not got enough players that are going to necessarily weigh in with a goal every week, sometimes you just need to make yourself hard to play against, and just sort of you have still got players that can nick you a goal kind of thing. And I think about some of the players in that squad, and like Lundstram, one of them, Crooks, Egan, Hughes. You just sometimes, to be a good championship team and to be solid, you don't need to be the biggest scorers in the division. You just need to be kind of have a mean defence. And just like I say, it'll be horrible to play against at times. And I don't really know if that's kind of the football that Yakurovich wants to play. Naturally, he's sort of been brought in probably by the owner to play a better maybe brand of football than what he thinks he's seen under previous managers. But you sometimes just you need to have that solid base first, and then if you can, you've got Abu Kamara as a player that could potentially go on a run of scoring goals. Joseph could suddenly, become a player that can weigh in with a few as well. But like the players that you mentioned, they are championship experienced, and they are kind of, they would be part of a team that could be hard to play against. And I think sometimes you've just got to pick up, to be away from the the bottom end of trouble. You just need to be able to pick up points consistently. Whether it doesn't need to be winning games every week, but just making sure you're not losing a lot of the games that we kind of ended up losing last season. And then like once you've got that sort of solid base, then you can kind of try and play a better brand of football potentially. But sometimes you've just got to make sure you're hard to play against first.
And Fletch, that's the thing, isn't it? Kathryn's spot on. You don't need to be the best technical team in the championship. You've got to be the prerequisites in the championship of being fit, as in being able to run for 90 odd minutes and being organised. You don't need to blow teams away 5-0. If you're difficult to beat, well, it'd be nice. But if you're difficult to beat, you're resolute. You can camp in when you need to, and you can do the ugly side of it. But you're fit, strong, and well organised, which we've seen under Sergei Yakurovich. Organisation is pretty spot on. You're going to have a chance, aren't you?
Yeah, I think the only team that I can think of that ran at 100 miles an hour were really structured and organised, but did really well and had that progression was Luton when they made their way up into the Premier League. I was always really impressed with them, but they never really had too many stars in their team, if you like. It was a really balanced 11 most week ends. I'm just looking through the comments now because there's a midfielder we haven't touched upon yet, and quite a lot of the fan base are intrigued to know this individual's whereabouts. So we'll come on to it in a moment. I feel like we've gone down a lot of different avenues. Ben H asks about, and this is, I guess, tying in the whole transfer situation. He asks, has Adjan decided to take a back seat and hand the reins over to Dublin et al. In light of the EFL involvement? Dublin obviously reported as speaking more directly with the EFL on Tuesday evening, which fills me with more confidence that Andela fills him with more confidence over Adjan having those conversations. Now, I disagree with that a little bit because I actually think that Andela is a very good salesperson in selling the dream of coming to play for the football club. I don't think there's ever been that problem of bringing a player in. However, I also take the point of Ben to say that if you've got people who have been around the championship for a lot longer, I am sensing that there is a theme emerging where much more experienced championship players are coming in with a blend of players from abroad. But as we've touched upon there, it seems to be on the surface with the fans and ourselves, it looks like there is a strong base going forward. Okay, there might be some doubts over whether or not, it could be a bit like 2017-18 again, where there was a lot of stars on paper, but you couldn't keep any of them fit, and some of them are made of glass. But I think I see that some people seem quite chilled at the fact that this new structure of Dublin and Hodge seems to be, I think, settling people down more, given the background situation with the EFL, etc. Another one that I'll add to the mix is about Puerta. What's the situation with him? Nigel asks that. But the midfielder that people are asking about is Casey Palmer. East Hull Tiger asks, has Baz spoken with Casey Palmer? I'm a bit concerned he didn't get much time off during the summer, given his injury problems last season. And London Tiger also said, Vaughan came on for Palmer in that number 10 role against Sunderland. Is he now viewed as the backup? Or is the club actively looking to sign a new centre attacking midfielder? That feels like our weakest position other than striker.
Yeah, I spoke to Casey quite a bit actually out in Turkey. Did an interview with him, and there's a video there's a bit of a short interview with him on the YouTube channel. I think Casey's fine. He'll be given a chance. And Casey, Casey's a player that I think you speak to any former manager or teammate of him, he's got oodles of talent. It's for Casey, it's delivering and finding that consistency. And if you're in that number 10 role, your job is to create. Not only to create, but to score goals. And there was a couple of times in Turkey in the Turkish friendlies against Istanbulspor and Kasımpaşa where he broke the lines really well. And then his final ball, there was one in the first game against Istanbulspor where he broke the line beautifully. and he was bearing down on goal, and you're thinking, go on then, shoot. And he didn't shoot. He played it into Tyrell Sellers-Fleming, and he put too much on it, and TSF got the shot away, and the goalkeeper saved it. But I think Casey, he's got to get numbers. He's got to get assists. Assists have got to be double figures. Goals have got to be up towards double figures. If you're playing in this team, under this manager, you've got to be contributing genuine, goals and assists. Otherwise, you're going to be out of the team. And the pressure's on for Casey because, I've been really impressed with what I've seen from Harry Vaughan. I think Nathan Tinsdale has looked bright. Obviously, scored a really nice goal in midweek against Sunderland, coming from a really, really high press. Crooks winning the press, forcing an error from the press, I should say. And I think they will. Whether this Destan, and the jury's out on this, and it's Destan, it's another player from the Super League. And let's be honest, all the players that have come from the Super League have flopped. Really, Tufan is the one from the Super League that's shown glimpses of. I think under Liam, Liam got him fit.
There it is.
Focused. What's that?
41 minutes in, and we've mentioned him.
Yeah, but yeah, I think Destan, the jury's out. I think 9 goals in 51 games is not a great return. So if we're pinning our hat on him getting 20 goals, I think it's misplaced. So, but we don't know what we're going to see from him. We don't know how he's going to adapt to the Championship. Is he durable enough? Can he play enough games? And then can he impact the game? So I still think that's an area they'll look at in that kind of area. But as Sergei said to me the other night, he thinks August will be, I think he said lively, because he thinks that, well, we all know that everything tends to happen towards the back end of the window anyway. And obviously by that point, hopefully in the next week or so, City will know where they're at with what they're dealing with the embargo situation. So I still think that's an area they'll look to try and bolster, because goals is the big. I still look at that team, and yeah, they've won 5 in a row in pre-season. It's fantastic. The momentum and just winning games again is amazing for everybody. And they've scored. They've been able to get goals from different players. But I still look at that team, and I look at that squad, and I think if they're going to get to 55, 60 points, have they got enough goals in that squad at the minute to get to 55, 60 points and be well out of danger? And my gut feeling at the minute is they haven't. But I do really rate the manager, and I think what I've seen in pre-season I've been really encouraged by. Just quickly before I let go on, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, I think another point we can make to this, Danny McDonald, I guess encompasses what you've just said there, Baz, and wants to get the opinion of all three of us. He says, for a bit of optimism, we've seen that good managers in this league can make a huge difference in terms of league position. If Jurkiewicz can get a couple of his targets in, Lundstram, which is one that he's got, and McBurney, etc., which sounds close, and we get a little bit of luck with injuries, then where can this team finish? So I guess we can maybe pop that to the end and see if we can come up with an area of the table that we think they might come in, because I think, there's still quite a few players that might come and go, but I think we're getting close to the start of the season. I think we're building a picture out with where we think they might finish.
Kathryn, how are you feeling? Are you a bit more enthused now you've seen, the likes of Andela? I mean, he's not played at championship level, but his cameo the other night was extremely, extremely exciting. It feels a bit like it sounds daft to say, but a younger Jadon Philogene. You've got Miller and Balumi back, hopefully not too far away. Are you Lundstram coming in? Obviously, we know there's 1 or 2 more that we expect. Hopefully before the season starts. Are you feeling a bit more enthused about the situation, despite all the carry on away from the field?
Yeah, I think so. One of my friends that in journalism has watched a bit of Andala and said he's really, really rapid. It's sometimes his decision making near the box that can let him down, but as a young player, that's something you would probably expect. So if he's a player obviously that's a bit raw and could probably have a few maybe eye-catching moments. A little bit kind of, obviously you mentioned Philogene was sort of a little bit similar. I definitely feel more optimistic than I did. Weirdly more optimistic than I did before the transfer embargo came in, just because I think now we've seen a bit more of what the manager is about. It's very difficult to judge when we knew kind of so little about him, and also at this point, however many weeks ago it was when I last spoke to you, we hadn't really made any any proper signings, or I think we've made a couple, but it does feel like the squad has beefed out a little bit more now. Like I kind of said earlier, like I just got accused of being really negative last time, and it was sort of almost as if like people kind of thought that we want them to kind of I want them to kind of fail. Like I'm a fan of the club and want them to succeed more, just as much as everybody else does. Obviously the kind of the Dean Holden had come in, and I think people took the comment the wrong way of me kind of saying, oh, he's somebody that, like, if anything did happen to the manager, that they might promote. And I meant that more so as a realistic kind of thing of, well, he's not Jakirovic's man, so he's probably not going to go with him if the worst did happen. It was more kind of an observation than sort of a prediction or anything like that. And like I said, you want to kind of be optimistic, and I think sometimes it's hard as a whole City fan with everything that's happened in the last couple of seasons to have that optimism instead of kind of the realism. And I probably had some optimism ahead of Tim Volter's appointment, and then that obviously didn't go to plan. So I think the track record of maybe the owner's managerial appointments, it has been difficult to kind of fully trust in him, and obviously that's nothing to do with Jakirovic. He's coming in, and you've got to get behind him 100% from the start, which is what I wouldn't, and assume every other fan will do. You just kind of, it's the unknown, isn't it? And everything else that's kind of going on with the club with the the running of it in the background, you have kind of fears about. And I know the owner's got a lot, is popular with a lot of people. Some people maybe have some more questions about different decisions that have been made. At the end of the day, we all want them to succeed. We all want to be cheering and celebrating, them not being in a relegation battle and pushing up higher at the other end of the table. And hopefully that's what they'll do. And I think you can kind of have different levels of opinion throughout the summer, but when the first game of the season comes around at Coventry, we'll all be kind of sat there feeling excited again about a new season and hoping that they have a good result. So like I say, I think they still need a couple more players in the building, especially in that attacking area. If they get McBurney in, brilliant. If they don't, then it does feel like they've sort of wasted a little bit of time chasing a guy that's sort of led them on, down the garden path potentially. Hopefully that's not the case, and hopefully he decides to come. But I do hope they've got a backup plan if he does say no and he chooses another club, because then we're sort of thinking, well, where's this? Where's the striker coming from? Because they definitely do need another one. But like we said earlier, it does feel a little bit optimistic now with some of the signings that they have managed to bring in, and hopefully they'll have a bit more free reign if they can sort this embargo out.
I think just to add to what KB has said there, and I completely agree with you, Baz. I think this pre-season, with every fixture that's gone on, with every game that's been played and the win chalked up, the confidence is growing. And having watched a few of these games, we've spoke before about little tactical insights and things that have made me think that they look really switched on, and they do look tactically astute. I think something that's really important to factor in is, if I look at the managers that have been in the Adrian era, and this relates to an interview that Jakirovic did with the BBC after the Sunderland game, is that he sounds like, even though that there are people there who were probably doing most of the negotiation for him, these are his players that he's interested in. Whereas I think under previous managers, Shota Arveladze and Tim Volter spring to mind, I think it was more of a, just go and get a player for me, and not a specific player that I like the look of. With Andela, for example, Sergei Jakirovic said he's watched him for 2 years, and he's been impressed with him over those 2-year period. So these are all players that tick Sergei Jakirovic's box. I think there'll be games right at the start of the season, whilst the players are gelling in, that will be difficult. I think Coventry look a really good outfit this year. So that's a great yardstick, match day number 1, to go away to Frank Lampard's Coventry City and try and get a result. But I think at the minute, the motion is that everything is positive. And okay, we've been critical over the summer, but I think it's been critical with a reasonable amount of reason. I think, the situation with the finances has been dominant. And when things like that happen, obviously everyone gets quite scared. But the players that they're bringing in, despite the restriction, are sensible signings. And it helps build a bridge. I think even though there's been discussion about it being a top 10 situation this year, of what people within the club want. Even if they finished around mid-table this year, let's say 13th, 14th, or pierced into the top half, that'd be a great achievement, given on where they were last season. I think that the nature of the division now is you can't just blast your way into promotion from any position in the table. I think there has to be that recognition that there needs to be the opportunity for Sergej Kirovic to not have just one season, but a couple of seasons at this level where he can continue to build and build and build. Because I think what they've got is a good base of lots of experience, and then they can start to add the little flashes of brilliance that might be players' ability coming in from outside of the division, which for me, as I say, good base. Let's see what comes from it.
I know we're pushed for time, so we'll cover this next week on. So Ryan, the return of Ryan Giles and Cody Dram, the influence, and also some of the young players that have kind of broken out in pre-season. Farrell Brown is obviously one of them. Cathal McCarthy is another. And Tinsdale and Harry Vaughan and Sellers Fleming as well that have looked bright. So we'll cover them. We'll cover those subjects when we.
Can I ask a quick question on Drame, Baz?
Yeah,
One of the fans has asked. It's in the rumour mill, but apparently Cody Drame is triggering some interest from Crystal Palace. Apparently,
yeah. There's a lot. Look, my gut feeling on Drame, excuse me, is that. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but I don't think. I think there was one or two people at the football club that didn't realise that Drame was
as good as he is.
Well, look, had got a bit of potential about him. Let's be fair; he wasn't. There were times last season where he was up and he was down. I mean, he was playing at left back. I think he only played right back a smattering of times, 2 or 3. Obviously, Louis Coyle, the skipper, was first choice, and that was the man. That's the manager's prerogative. So Drame was frustrated, I think, that he wasn't playing. And I don't think the club, some people at the club realised that what they'd got on their hands. And then suddenly they started getting phone calls from clubs, Derby, Preston, and there were others that were ringing up and going, we want Cody Dram. So I think they've gone, well, hang on a minute. We've got a player here that's caught in a lot of interest. Maybe we should actually look at the player we've got and see if he's actually any half decent. And then obviously Jakirovic has come in, taken one look at Drame and gone, I don't want him going anywhere because I think he's a very, very good player. Now it's the quirk of circumstance, unfortunate for Louis Coyle that he got injured against Istanbulspor, and I mean there's an outside chance he could be fit to face Coventry, which is incredible, given he did his hamstring. But Cody Drame's got the shirt, and I think he needs to play. He wants to play. If he's not going to play, if it's going to be Coyle, I think Drame will want to go. And understandably, because he doesn't want to have another season at the age of 23 where he's playing second fiddle, and nor should he. So that's there is a lot of interest in him at the minute. City don't want to let him go. Now they've gone from being prepared to sell him at the start of the summer, which they were, to realising, hang on, we might have a decent player on our hands here, and particularly in the situation we're in, we're not going to be able to go and replace him and get better. So. Maybe we should actually appreciate what we've got and try and get the best out of him. So for me, at the minute, he stays. But, it's the transfer window. You've got interest in... I know there's interest in Ryan Giles, and there has been for all summer. There's interest in Abu Kamara. There's interest in Cody Drame. There will come a point where they will look at their finances and think, right, we need to... we've got to sell... We need to sell a couple more players so we can bring in X amount of other players, and you know how the domino effect works in transfer. So I can't sit here and say that Cody Drame is going to be a Hull City player on September the 2nd at all. But I unless it would take something ridiculous for them to want to sell him now, and rightly so. We never got to, before we wrap up. We never got to Puerto, by the way. As it stands, because I know somebody asked, he's not a Hull City player and isn't going to be a Hull City player. So I guess, in essence, he's still a Bayer Leverkusen player. Now, that's something they're discussing with the Football League. But from what I was told, the most recent conversation I had was that Puerto isn't going to be a Hull City player. Now, they were hoping that the EFL would sort of kind of help them out a bit because they'd got a desire to sell him. So they'd pay Leverkusen 3.5 or whatever it was going to be under the obligation. But then they would sell him for a profit. and they were trying to explain to the EFL, well, hang on a minute, if you're having this, you're giving us the stick about our finances. Well, let us sign him because we can sell him on and make more money. But it doesn't look like that's going to. The EFL are going to, and the EFL have got to uphold the rules. I get that. They've got a job to do, and they've got to be. They've also got to be seen to be consistent as well. There is a theory doing around that perhaps the EFL have been a little bit heavy-handed with City because of what's happened at Reading, because of what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday, and what's happening at Morecambe, albeit in the National League at the minute. But maybe the EFL are being a little bit over the top with City and kind of having a hawk eye on them, and absolutely everything they do is analysed to the minutiae, because the EFL are trying to make a point not only to Adjun and about the way the club's managed, because they don't think it's being managed very well, but also to assign to other clubs to say we're not going to allow it to happen. And if you criticise the EFL for allowing Sheffield Wednesday to happen, you then, I guess, can't criticise them for being really hot on Hull City's finances to try and stop it happening again. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, as it stands, I don't think Poeta will be a Hull City player.
One final question, Baz. I think it's the most important question of the lot from what's been sent to us. It came from Columbo. I want to see if KB knows the answer to this. Who invented the skip? Go on, KB, have a go.
That sounds
who
like
invented the skip?
Is where one of Smithy's questions is who invented the plug. I didn't know the answer to that. I don't know who the answer to who invented the skip.
It wasn't Gary Lineker, was it? Even though I think he was 4 other answers. Your dad got involved as well with a hot potato. He's asking if Barry Manilow is the greatest Barry of all time. Can we go to Barry Cooper for his opinion, please?
Well, given the fact that almost 42 years ago, funnily enough, on September the 2nd, I was named after the Could It Be Magic hero. Yes, he was the. So I did the questions for your dad, Kathryn, on the Disability Supporters Association, and he asked me who was the most famous Barry, and everybody expects Barry from EastEnders, but I went Manilow because he's my namesake. So big up Manilow and his new face.
His new face.
So yeah, right. And can I just, before we go, can I just say how City, I think, have won competitively 29 games in the last 92 at home since they came back to the Championship. Sergei won. Yes, it's a friendly. I know it's only a friendly, but he won his first home game. They've now won 5 games in a row, and yes, I know against different opposition, Grimsby Town and Istanbulspor, etc., etc. I get all of that, but this is a football club that we've had an awful year. So to win 5 games in a row, probably for the first time since Grant McCann's League One team, or correct me if I'm wrong, but how nice it is just to go and watch Hull City win a bloody football match. And it is pre-season, and they might lose at Coventry, but just don't take this little bit of joy that we've had over the last couple of weeks away from us, where we've gone to a Hull City game, particularly those that went on Tuesday night to watch the game against Sunderland, and saw them win a football match at home. Praise the Lord.
It's I think that's another question for another day, isn't it? But you could genuinely argue, couldn't you? Is the MKM cursed? Because Hull FC have got the same problem, haven't they? I mean, there are some fans here who listen to this and have a fiction for rugby league as well, and Hull FC just can't win at home either. So maybe there's something in the grounds of West Park which is betraying both of our clubs that play there.
We need to get Ted Lasso in and get Ted Lasso to do like that thing he did at Richmond, where was it something like they'd never won at Everton or something? I don't know what it was. Anyway, they did like this massive thing to try and get rid of all the negativity and the ghost. Maybe if Sergei doesn't win, for a bit at home, we have to do that. We all bring something from our childhood that we have to throw in the bin and set fire to. But yeah, look, he's won his first home game, so let's revel in that, and hopefully against Getafe on Saturday. I can't imagine there'll be too many Spanish press jumping for joy, but if there are, Kathryn, I'll let you know.
I was just going to say the new home kit's nice as well, isn't it? I don't know when the away kit might come out, but the home kit's lovely.
It is, yeah. It's a fantastic. I really like it. Although I did have the first friendly. I got up close to the player shirts and the badges. It looked like they've been stuck on with I don't know. They didn't look great, the badges, but
Pritt
I'm sure
stick.
that I'm sure that the actual when they get delivery of the proper shirts and they've had time to produce the proper stuff. It'll be, but the design is really nice. In fact, the design of all 3 shirts are really nice. The away shirt and the 3rd shirt. So I know a lot of people are asking about when the kit's coming out. I would imagine not too far away. To be fair, I know a lot of clubs are starting to release their 2nd and 3rd kit. So I'm sure City won't be too far behind them. But the away kit and the 3rd kit, I really like them. I think all 3 kits this year are very, very good. So I echo that, Kathryn. It looks really smart, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Just quickly, I know we keep saying this, but what's happening with Brandon Williams that he's came on the other night? Are they pursuing that, or are they likely to leave it?
I think they're going to pursue it. I think they're going to give Brandon time to prove that he's up to it. That I think. Look, the quality of Brandon Williams has absolutely never been in doubt. Right from when he broke through at Man United and dislodged Luke Shaw in the first team. I don't think his quality has ever been in doubt. It's his his head and his attitude. I saw I heard a podcast a while ago. I think he did it with Ben Foster, and he basically said that sometimes he just drifts off and he just almost can't be bothered, and he wonders why. And hopefully, obviously he had the court hearing in May where he got suspended jail sentence. He's banned from driving for I think 3 years. Hopefully, he's reached a point in his life where he realizes that it's now or never at the age of 24, and he gets his head screwed on. And I think if he can prove that, then I think Hull City will pursue it. We'll touch on Ryan Giles next time, but they wanted left back cover all summer. Hopefully, Gilo is in a place where he can produce. We've seen it in the friendly so far. He's been back to it for me. He's shown glimpses of being back to his best that we saw at Middlesbrough a couple of years ago in pre-season, albeit he's having ankle problems, so he's still a bit behind everybody else. But yeah, I mean, it's I guess they've got time, haven't they, Kathryn? Because because of Ryan, assuming Ryan stays fit and he keeps his form up, they're not having to fudge it with a left-footed centre half at left back at the start of the season. They've got Gilo, so they can afford to perhaps give Brandon the time to. He's not played for 7. I think his last game for Ipswich was just after Christmas 2023. So, not far off 2 years in football terms. He's been out of it, and he's obviously had all this stuff going on with the court case and blah de blah. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I mean, if they can get I think it all comes down to him. It's all down to him. If he's mentally right and he can get fit and stay fit, then I think, what would you be doing?
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially as a player, he did really well at Ipswich as well, didn't he, a couple of years ago? So if he can get himself right, then could be a great piece of business, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because we all talk about. I know we're shooting well over time now, but the embargo is a negative. The fact that the club have had lots of problems. It's been well documented. In podcasts, newspapers, whatever else. And obviously, the EFL don't do this if they've not got good reason. But sometimes, out of these sort of situations, can come, good situations that perhaps you wouldn't have had. And maybe Brandon Williams is a situation. If it does work out, that they wanted to sign Owen Beck from Liverpool. That went belly up because they couldn't do it. So they've had to go elsewhere. Maybe if they sign Owen Beck, Ryan Giles doesn't. They've got a £4 million asset there. Maybe Ryan Giles doesn't have the summer he's had. Then they don't sign Brandon Williams, and that might become a really good signing. If they can buy players, perhaps they don't sign Joel Andela. And who's to say that he doesn't have a breakthrough season in his first season at this level and have a really good season? Maybe they don't sign John Lundstram. So in a bizarre kind of perverse kind of way, perhaps this embargo might just, and the situation might just not only kind of give them a bit of a wake-up call in how to run the football club and get their finances back on an even keel, but also bring perhaps players that they wouldn't have been looking at before. I don't know. That's just me speculating, but perhaps.
2 more things that I can just quickly raise before we sign off. First of all, congratulations, Baz, on keeping the Katsu chicken within the MKM Stadium. I'm sure the fans will be delighted with that. But more importantly, Bernsey was there as well, wasn't he, on Tuesday night? I think a lot of fans have been obviously concerned for someone who's obviously got a very high profile in the area, and it's really good to see that our colleague and friend is on the mend.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Tuesday night was a strange one because for the first time in a long time, the Katsu chicken wasn't the highlight of the night. It was actually the football, a really enjoyable football match. And friendlies are generally horrific spectacles. So it was a really good game to watch. The Katsu chicken was phenomenal before the game, and then Bernsey turned up, and that was God bless him. He's still not right. He's still not fully fit. His voice is still not quite where it wants to be. But the fact he was there is a massive positive. So big love to the old jock, and hopefully he'll be back on here soon when he's fit and able. But yeah, absolutely right, Fletch, and we send him our best wishes.
Indeed we do.
And on that bombshell, the test match is starting day 2 of it's Yorkshire Day. So let's hope that Joe Root and Harry Brook have some impact at the Oval today. So the test match is starting. I better go and get that on, and we'll catch up with you next week when it will be season starting week. So Kathryn, great to see you back from Swiss.
Thank you very much. Yes, nice to be back.
With a trophy and a medal in your pocket. And Fletch from his dirty little cupboard.
I'll go and give it a clean. One thing really quickly, KB, I'm disappointed you didn't go viral this time after the celebrations of the Lionesses.
I bet they blocked that, didn't they? Did they put security on the doors to stop them coming in with covering champagne?
Yeah, I think the press conference room was not near the dressing room this time. At Wembley, obviously, you're quite close to the dressing room, but the stadium in Basel was a bit strange where they had their press conference room was nowhere near the changing room. So I don't think the players were actually that close. So no kind of gate crashing happening this time.
Oh, that's a shame. Right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We will be back next week. And if we've learnt one thing today, it is don't let David Prutton come to a football match because your team will definitely lose. On that bombshell, let's go. Thanks for watching, everybody. We will be back next week. Prutz will be with us. Thanks, Fletch. Thanks, Kathryn. And big love to Bernsey.